Let's go on. We'll pick up on page 44. Use the spot healing brush, which is a fantastic tool. It makes fixing mistakes like the ones that are in this image really, really simple. So let's zoom in. I'm going to use my Z key on the keyboard to get to my zoom tool and zoom in a little bit so I can see this crease here. And yeah, it's a fold in the image before it was scanned. That happens a lot in older pictures. Let's go over to the tools panel and we'll come here and find the spot healing brush tool. It's the first one of our healing tools. And we'll go here. The spot healing brush tool works with, not surprisingly, a brush. Let's go here and set our brush to 100% hard brush, about 25 px in diameter. So I'm going to come up here to my brushes. I'm going to change my hardness to 100%. It already is. I'll take my size to 25 px. Let's take a quick moment, a quick aside, to look at some of the shortcut keys that help us in adjusting the brush size. We'll use this a lot when we get to painting, but it's also helpful for the other tools that use brushes like the spot healing brush. So the bracket keys next to the P adjust the size of the brush. So the left bracket makes the brush smaller. I'm hitting the left bracket. I hit it 3 times. And the right bracket makes the brush larger in increments of 5 pixels. So if you want to get to 25, you can just left or right bracket as necessary to make it larger and smaller. Similarly, shift in those brackets makes the brush softer and harder. Shift and left bracket makes the brush softer. You see it getting smaller, but if you look up here closely, it's actually getting softer. And if I shift right bracket enough times, I'll get to a fully hard brush. So a very fast way to get the hardness you want and the size you want is to use the bracket keys next to the P on the keyboard. All right, so we've chosen a brush that's just about the size of our crease, and that is intentional. And the crease goes straight down, and you'll see in a minute why that's really helpful. So I'm going to right now just kind of click and drag down, and my dragging is not great with the mouse. It's not perfect, but click and drag down. I'm going to go down to about here, and magically that removes the crease. Seems amazing. I'm going to use I'm zoomed in, so I'm going to use my space bar and hold down the space bar. That turns my cursor into a hand. That gives me the hand tool, and I can drag up to see more of the image. That's another very useful shortcut. And again, I'll click here and just paint down with this brush, and I'm not doing a great job of going straight, but that'll do it. Paint further down, healing brush, magic again. Again, space bar to drag up, and I'll do it a couple more times. Paint down, space bar to drag up, and I got one more to go. Paint down, not too bad. There it is, almost completely gone away. Now what we just did was a fine way to use the spot healing brush, but I'm going to show you a different way, especially since we've got a very straight line. I'm going to go back and undo what I did a couple times. Just pause for a minute while I go and do that, and then I'll show you a different way to do the same thing. Alright, so I did Control-Alt-Z a few times to undo that healing brush so I can go back to where I was. And here's what I'll do. I'll use the fact that this is a straight line crease, and I'll use a property of the brush to help me paint a straight line. So if I click once with the spot healing brush and just come on down here, and I hold my shift key and click again with the spot healing brush, it paints a black line down all the way and clears that crease in just one click. That's a super fast and super easy way to paint a straight line. In this case, we painted a straight line with the spot healing brush. Next is our content aware patch tool. Let's go under here to the tools panel, and the patch tool is under the spot healing brush tool. You can click on that and find it underneath, and also do Shift J. J is the keyboard shortcut, and Shift J till we get down. We'll cycle through the tools till we get down to the patch tool again. Down here in your status bar, you can see the patch tool is the tool we have chosen, and we'll come up here and make sure we choose content aware. So if it says normal, change it to content aware. Let's try to make a selection around this boy. Again, I will zoom in, Control plus again to zoom in on this boy, and I use my trick where I hold my space bar down to get the hand and move over. I could have switched to the zoom tool, but sometimes if you're already on a tool, you don't want to switch back and forth, so I'll zoom out a little bit, Control minus, and there it is. I have the boy. Now I'm going to try to draw a selection, a marquee around the edge. Drawing with the mouse is not the easiest thing in the world. I'm not great at it, but just do the best you can to draw yourself some kind of selection. You can always modify your selection later. We'll learn about selections in Chapter 3, Lesson 3. All right, so I'm going to start here at the top by his head and just kind of draw a selection around it. If you mess up, you can always Control D, deselect, and try it again. But we're trying to draw a selection around the boy and his shadow because you don't want the shadow there if the person's missing. and we will drag around the bottom. And you want to stay as close as possible to the boy in shadow without actually cutting into the boy in shadow, because you want to be able to get rid of it entirely. And you'll see the content aware tool will make this pretty straightforward. So I'll come up here, come around, and again, I don't want to get his head. I think I've avoided, may have a little piece of his head. We can fix that later as necessary. So now what we do with this patch tool, again, make sure you have content aware as a selection. When we click and drag from inside the selection, Photoshop will replace the pixels in the selection with other pixels, and it'll do it in a content aware fashion. It'll do it in a way that makes it almost magic. So let's try it. I'm going to click and drag, in this case, to the left. And as I do it, you'll see the boy disappearing. Be sure you don't go too far, otherwise you end up getting pieces of the mom and the baby. You don't want to do that. You want to go enough to get rid of the boy and not to pick up any extra pixels. And again, you can drag up and down, but I'm dragging as horizontally as I can. I'm trying to make sure that the wall, notice the lines in the shadow on the wall, line up as much as I can. So I'm going to come over a little bit more so I get rid of the boy's shadow. And that is pretty good. You can always tweak it later. And I'll do Control D to deselect. Voila.